Good afternoon. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Today I'll be reading from the book The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Currently, I am in chapter 14, Resist the Downward Pull of the Group, the Law of Conformity, Part 5, The Court and its Courtiers. Any type of court obviously revolves around the leader. The courtier's power depending on the relative closeness of their relationship with this leader. Although leaders come in many varieties, one dynamic is fairly universal. The courtiers, minus the cynical types, see below, will tend to idealize those in power. They will see their leaders as smarter, cleverer, more perfect than is the reality. This will make it easier for them to justify their fawning behavior. This dynamic is similar to what we all experience in childhood. We idealize our parents in order to feel more secure about the power they have over us. It was too frightening to imagine our parents as weak or incompetent. Dealing with authority figures in the court tends to regress us to our childhood and the family dynamic. The way we adapted to our parents' power and the presence of our siblings will play itself out again in adult form in the court. If we felt the deep need to please our parents in every way in order to feel more secure, we will become the pleaser type in the court. If we resented our siblings for the parental attention they drew away from us and tried to dominate these siblings, we will be the envious type and resort to passive aggression. We may want to monopolize the leader's attention as we once tried to do with our mother or father. And so we can say that courtiers tend to fall into certain types, depending on deep patterns stemming from childhood. Some of these types can come quite dangerous if they accumulate power within the court, and they are usually adept at disguising their negative qualities in order to rise from within. It is best to be able to identify them as early as possible and take necessary defensive action. The following are 7 of the more common types you will find. The intriguer. These individuals can be particularly difficult to recognize. They seem intensely loyal to the boss and to the group. No one works harder or is more ruthlessly efficient. But this is a mask they wear. Behind the scenes, they are continually intriguing to amass more power. They generally have a disdain for the boss that they are careful to conceal. They feel they could do the job better, and they yearn to prove this. Perhaps they have competitive issues in childhood with the father figure. In the court of Richard Nixon, Alexander Haig, 1924 to 2010, epitomized this type. A graduate of West Point and a decorated war hero in Vietnam, he was hired as one of several assistants to Henry Kissinger, Nixon's national security advisor. Kissinger's own little court was filled with men with brilliant academic backgrounds. Haig could not compete on this level. He stayed away from policy arguments. Instead, he so expertly tailored himself to the desires and needs of Kissinger that he quickly rose from within. He organized Kissinger's desk, streamlined his schedule, and would do the lowliest tasks, even helping his boss dress for an important evening. He silently suffered Kissinger numerous and volcanic temper tantrums. But what Kissinger did not realize was the depth of Haig's ambition and his contempt for his boss. He was continually playing to the real boss in the game, Nixon himself. While Kissinger was out most evenings attending some party, Nixon would see the light on in Haig's office at all hours. Nixon, a workaholic himself, could not help but admire this. Of course, Haig made sure he worked evenings when Nixon was there and would notice him. Soon Nixon was borrowing him for his own tasks. In 1973, as the Watergate scandal blossomed, Nixon appointed Haig as his chief of staff. This infuriated Kissinger. Not only did he feel Haig had used him for his own purposes, but he was now having to report to Haig as a superior. To make matters worse, Haig had seen up close all of Kissinger's weaknesses and had a lot of dirt on him, and Kissinger was certain he would be sharing this information with Nixon, who loved such gossip. To colleagues, Haig could be chummy and even disarming, but behind the scenes, he undercut almost everyone in his path, wiretapping their phones, putting his name on their ideas and memos. As the Watergate crisis deepened and Nixon fell into a depression, Haig slowly took over operations with a zeal that surprised and disgusted many. For several months, he became the de facto president. This pattern repeated throughout his career. As Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, after the assassination attempt on the president in 1981, Haig told reporters, "I am in control here." In identifying this type, you must look behind the efficient and loyal front and even the charm. Keep your eye instead on their maneuvers and their impatience to rise from within. Look at their past record for signs of intrigue. They are masters at making leaders and others dependent on their efficiency as means of binding them and securing their own position. Pay attention to that little extra zeal they display to please the boss and make themselves useful. Realize that when they are looking at you, they are thinking of how they can use you as a tool or stepping stone, imagining themselves blessed with brilliance. They have little compunction in doing whatever is necessary to advance themselves. It is best to keep your distance and not become one of their pawns, nor their enemy. The steerer. This type is generally riddled with insecurities, but adept at disguising them from those in the court. They feel deep wells of resentment and envy for what others seem to have that they don't, part of their childhood pattern. Their game is to infect the group with doubts and anxieties, stirring up trouble, which puts them at the center of action and may allow them to get closer to the leader. They will often target another courtier who triggers their envy, and they will spread rumors and innuity about the courtier in question. Playing upon the latent envy of other courtiers, they will be full of secret information for the leader about those who might be less than perfectly loyal. The more turmoil and emotions they can stir up, the better they can take advantage of the situation. If a rebellion of some sort suddenly erupts within the court, you can be sure they had a finger in it. All it takes is one good stirrer in a court to create endless drama and discord, making life intolerable for everyone. They actually get a secret pleasure from doing so. They will cover their tracks by being hyper righteous and indignant about the betrayals of others. They project such a front of loyalty and devotion to the cause that it is hard to suspect them of being so manipulative. If you notice courtiers who innocently share with you some rumor, be wary. They could be of this type, and you may be the target of such rumors at some point. If you feel the group succumbing to viral anxiety about some vague threat, try to locate the source of this. You might have a steerer in your midst. They can be tricky. They can project any extra cheery or optimistic front to conceal the churning negativity within. Always look behind the mask and notice the secret delight they have when something bad happens. When dealing with a known steerer, do not directly or indirectly insult or show disrespect, even though they are quite insensitive to the feelings of those they maglant. They are hypersensitive to any signs of disrespect to them, and since they have fewer compunctions than you, They will make your life miserable through their passive aggressive campaigns. The gatekeeper. The goal of the game for these types is gaining exclusive access to leaders, monopolizing the flow of information to them. They may resemble the intriguer in their willingness to use people to get to this position. But unlike that type, their objective is not to take over power. They are motivated not by a secret disdain for others, but by their intense adoration for the person on top. They often rise to the position of fawning over the genius and perfection of the leader, whom they idealize. There might even be a slight sexual edge to their attraction. They integrate themselves with leaders by giving them a great deal of narcissistic supply. As gatekeepers, they keep away irritating courtiers and buffer leaders from petty political struggles, which seem to make them quite useful. In gaining such proximity, they also get to see the leaders' dark sides and learn of their weaknesses. This unconsciously binds leaders even more tightly to gatekeepers, whom they might fear alienating. Having such power over the admired leader is their endgame. This type can also become the policeman or policewoman in the court, making sure the group adheres to the ideas and beliefs of the leader. Once such types are installed in power, they are extremely dangerous. Running afoul of them in any way will cut off key access to the one player on the board who matters the most, and other perks. Recognize them early on by their shameless psychopathy toward the boss. These types obviously wear a very different face to other courtiers from what they present to leaders, and you can try to gather evidence to reveal their duplicity to the leader before it is too late. But they generally are masters at understanding and playing to the insecurities of bosses and come to know them better than you do. They can easily turn your efforts around. In general, it is best to recognize their power and remain on their good side. If you're a leader, beware of such types. They will tend to isolate you from the group, and isolation is dangerous. The shadow enabler. Leaders are often in a difficult position. They have to bear the responsibility for what happens to the group and the stress that goes with that. At the same time, they must maintain a reputation that is above reproach more than others. They have to keep their shadow side, see chapter 9, under wraps. This could be extramarital desires they have had to repress, or paranoia about the loyalty to everyone around them, or the craving to do some violence against a hated enemy. Unconsciously, their shadow is yearning to come out. In steps the enabler, one of the cleverest and most diabolical courtiers of all. These types often are closer to their own shadow, aware of their own darkest yearnings. In childhood, they probably felt these desires deeply but had to repress them, which made such desires all the more powerful and obsessive. As adults, they search for complicit partners with whom they can bring the shadow out into the open. They are masters at detecting repressed desires in others, including leaders. They may begin in conversation to broach somewhat taboo subjects, but in a non-threatening, jocular way. The leaders fall into the spirit and opens up a bit, having established contact with the leader's shadow. The enabler then takes this further with suggestions of possible actions for leaders, ways to vent their frustrations, with the enabler handling it all and serving as protection. Charles Colson, special counsel to President Nixon, carved out just such a role for himself. He knew his boss to be quite paranoid about all the enemies supposedly surrounding him. Nixon was also quite insecure about his own masculinity and yearned to punish his purported enemies and display some swagger. He felt deeply frustrated in not being able to act on these desires. Colson played on his worst instincts, allowing Nixon to vent his feelings in meetings and then insinuating ways to act on them, such as revenge schemes against hated reporters. Nixon found this too tempting and too therapeutic to resist. Colson shared some of these hidden sadistic desires himself, and so this was the perfect way for him to live out his own shadow. In any court, there are inevitably those with a low character who live for scheming and knocking heads. They are not overtly violent or evil, but simply have fewer compunctions than others. If they are enablers and inveigle their way into a position close to the boss, there is little you can do against them. It is too dangerous to cross such types, unless what they are planning is so dark that it is worth risking your own position to stop them. Take heart that their careers are generally short. They often serve as the fall guy if what they advocated or acted on becomes public. Be aware that they may try to play the game with you. Do not take the first step into any dubious actions they are trying to draw you into. Your clean reputation is the most important thing you possess. Maintain a polite distance. The court jester. Almost every court has its jester. In the past, they wore a cap and bells, but today they come in different varieties and looks. They can be the court cynic and scuffer, who has license to poke fun at almost everyone and everything, including sometimes the leaders themselves, who tolerate this because it shows their apparent lack of insecurity and sense of humor. Another variety is the domesticated rebel. Such types are allowed to go against the dress code, display loser behavior, and espouse unconventional opinions. They can be a bit flamboyant. In meetings, unlike anyone else, they are allowed to come up with wild opinions contrary to the group. Such conformists prove that the leaders encourage the free exchange of opinion, at least in appearance. These types fall into such roles because secretly they have a fear of responsibility and a dread of failing. They know that as jesters, they are not taken seriously and are given little actual power. Their humor and antics give them a place in the court without the stress of actually having to get things done. Their rebelliousness never really represents a threat or challenge to the status quo. In fact, they make it so others in the group can feel a bit superior to the in-house oddball, more comfortable in conforming to the norm. Never take their existence as a sign that you can freely imitate their behavior. There is rarely more than one jester per court for a reason. If you feel the pull to rebel against the norms of the group, better to keep it as subtle as possible. Often the modern court will tolerate differences in appearances, but not so much in ideas and political correctness. Better to reserve your nonconformity for your private life or until you have amassed more power. The mirrorer. These types are often among the most successful courtiers of all because they are capable of playing the double game to the hilt. They are adept at charming leaders and fellow courtiers, maintaining a broad base of support. Their power is based on the idea that everyone at heart is a narcissistic. They are masters at reflecting back to people their own moods and ideas, making them feel validated without sensing the manipulation, as opposed to using overt flattery. In the court of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Frances Perkins, FDR's Secretary of Labor and longtime advisor, was the consummate player of this game. She had high levels of empathy and could sense Roosevelt's mood. She would adapt to them. She knew he loved to hear stories. So any idea she presented to him, she would present with some type of storyline, and this would charm him. She listened to whatever he said with much more attention than anyone else, and could later refer verbatim to something brilliant he had said, which proved how deeply she had listened. If she was going to recommend an action that might meet some resistance, she would couch it as one of his own ideas from the past, but with a slight modification of her own. She could decipher the meaning of his various types of smiles, knowing when she could go further with her idea and when to stop in her tracks. And she made certain to confirm his idealized image of himself as the noble warrior fighting on behalf of the disenfranchised. To other courtiers, she presented herself in the most non threatening manner, never making a show of her influence over her boss, and applying the same type of charm to everyone who crossed her path. In this way, she made it hard to feel threatened or envious of her powers. This is the role you might want to consider playing in the court because of the power it brings. But to pull it off, you will have to be a great reader of people, sensitive to their nonverbal cues. You want to be able to mirror their moods, not just their ideas. This will cast a spell over them and lower their resistance. With leaders, you must be aware of their idealized opinion of themselves and always confirm it in some way, or even encourage them to live up to it. Those on top are lonelier and more insecure than you imagine, and they will lap this up. As mentioned before, overt flattery can be dangerous because people can see through it. But even if they see through your mirroring, they will remain charmed and want more. The favorite and the punching bag. These two these two types occupy the highest and lowest rungs of the court. Every king or queen must have his or her favorite within the court, as opposed to the other types, whose power generally depends on efficiency and demonstrations of object loyalty. The favorite's rise in power is often based on cultivating a more personal, friend like relationship. Early on, they act relaxed and chummy with the leader without seeming disrespectful. Many leaders are secretly dying to not have to be so formal and in control. Sometimes leaders who are lonely will pick out one person to occupy this position. With the favorite, they will gladly share secrets and bestow favors. This, of course, will stir up the envy of other courtiers. This position is fraught with danger. First, it depends on the friendly feelings of leaders, and such feelings are inevitably fickle. People are more sensitive to the words or actions of friends, and if they feel somehow disappointed or betrayed in any way, they can go from liking or hating the former friend. Second, the favorite receives so much privileged treatment that they often become arrogant and entitled. Leaders might tire of their spoiled behavior. Courtiers are already envious of the favorite, but their increased arrogance only alienates them further. When favorites fall from grace, and history is littered with such stories, the fall is hard and painful. No one comes to their defense, and because their rise did not depend on any special skill, they often have nowhere else to go. Try to avoid being lured into taking this position. Make your power dependent on your accomplishments and your usefulness, not on the friendly feelings people have for you. Much, much as in any children's playground, in the court there is almost always a person who plays. Excuse me. Who play is almost always a person who plays the role of the punching bag, whom everyone feels encouraged to laugh at in some way and feels superior to. People today are more politically correct and careful, and yet this human need for a punching bag is too embedded in our nature. People will base their feelings of superiority on the punching bag's supposed incompetence or unorthodox opinions or lack of sophistication, whatever makes them seem different and somehow inferior. Much of their ridicule will be behind the back of the targets, but they will sense it. Do not engage in this dynamic. It will coarsen and debase you. See everyone in the court as your potential ally. Within the ruthless environment of the court, try to befriend the punching bag, showing a different way of behaving and taking the fun out of this cruel game. That was interesting. Huh. That was more in depth. In conclusion, pretty much, I mean, I like how they went through, they broke down the pretty much the different Courtiers. I pretty much, with me, with my having grown up with four sisters, pretty much in a mother, I experienced all these, the intriguer, the stirrer, the gatekeeper, the shadow enabler, the court jester, the mirrorer, the favorite, and the punching bag. I just want to share I was in my, pretty much in my family since I was not of blood, well, my mother, but of my stepfather, I was the punching bag. I can relate to that. But I think the reason why I always stayed in, got into a lot of trouble was because I didn't want to be the punching bag. And then I tried to move out of that into the court jester. I mean, I tried all of them, to be accepted in my mom's family. Well, I say my stepfather, but since I was the bastard, I wasn't. I was the steer. I tried everything. But me, now that I'm at this age, I look back and I'm like, shit. That's just part of animal nature. Like, I wasn't, when you're not of blood, nothing like that, you could try all these different, well, the only one that you're pretty much, that I fell into is the punching bag. So, and there's nothing my mother could do about it. So, I realize that now, like, I was like, man, why did I go through, I tried to make my childhood the best I could, but it was just so fucked up that, I couldn't concentrate on like education, because I was so busy trying to be accepted into my family that just nothing worked. So now I look back, I'm like, shit, I just know the reason on that. So not having like pretty much a father is for especially for a son, that's the worst that I've seen. So outro. Subscribe to the channel. Comment any questions you have. Like if the information was inspiring for you. And share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. My Instagram is Max_Bugatti_8008. I'm all about family first. I'm a global stock investor. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. I have a masculine confidence building program. And currently, I'm out here in San Francisco, California. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.